Certainly after 12 years of not interviewing, that would be a nice exercise.
Yeah, because, if they're a good interviewer, they'll try and put you at ease because they want to get to the truth, right? They don't want you to be nervous. They don't want to play power games with you. They're just trying to get to who you really are. And is there a good cultural fit between you and their company? Is there a good team fit? Do you have the right attitude? And then in my case, finally, do you have the skills? Because for me...
ColdFusion Alive, the podcast for the ColdFusion community. Discover practices, tools, techniques, tips and trends for modern ColdFusion development. Brought to you by TerraTech, the ColdFusion experts. Develop, secure, optimize. Here is your host, the founder of TerraTech, Michaela Light.
Welcome back to the show. I'm here with Doug McCaughan, if I'm saying your name right, Doug. Did I screw that?
Very close. McCaughan.
McCaughan. All right.
McCaughan. It's MCON.
Yes.
I throw in a lot of letters to confuse people.
There you go. Lots of C's in there. But we're going to be talking about how to get your next ideal ColdFusion job. And I'll tell you in a moment what happened with Doug. It's a bit of a shocking story. But what we're going to be focusing on in the episode is what are the modern ways now to get your ideal ColdFusion job, because it really sending out resumes and all the things that people used to do don't work as well, and there are better ways you can use, and we'll talk about those in the episode. And then for those of you who don't know Doug, he's been doing ColdFusion for over 20 years. He's also a juggler and a Boy Scout troop leader, I think is how you phrased it.
The Scoutmaster.
And he also not only is he a juggler with juggling balls, but he does a lot of different IT and programming languages, as many ColdFusion developers do, I know. So man with many whatever you call it, Swiss Army knife skills. So and he lives currently in Tennessee, though he's told me he's willing to relocate pretty much anywhere, I think, in the universe.
Absolutely.
That they do ColdFusion. And he has 5 kids and a fantastic wife. And he's also a radio operator. I don't understand these acronyms you shared in your bio, but maybe other people who are into radio operation will understand.
Those are the call signs. Those are my names on the radio.
Oh, okay. That's what it is. And he also likes adventuring in the mountains and wildernesses of the country. So welcome, Doug.
It's good to be here. Yeah.
And just to summarize your situation, you'd been working at a university in their IT department doing ColdFusion for, I think, maybe 12 years. Is that roughly right?
Right around 12 years. I was just under 12 years, began January 2010. And
yes.
Go ahead.
And then you got a new CIO, right? I think. And we better leave the university nameless, though the name will become apparent later, I guess, but we won't mention it right now. And the new CIO, as often happens, they had a whole new strategy, and they wanted to get rid of ColdFusion and switch to 100% Microsoft software, which unfortunately ColdFusion is not made by Microsoft. Well, unfortunately for this CIO. And so the whole ColdFusion development team, I think 8 people, if I remember right.
It was a small team. It was 3 of us, really. It was just 3.
3, but all fired, let go.
We started at 45. It was
wow.
It was a 6-week project at the beginning of 2010 that lasted 12 years.
Anyway, the point is, from no fault of your own, it's not like you did anything bad, but the company pivoted, organization pivoted away from ColdFusion, and suddenly after 12 years, you're like, oh dear, I need to get a job. And you posted in the ColdFusion programmers group in Facebook saying something to this effect. And I said, well, maybe I can help you make over your LinkedIn and, some other things that will help you get a job in the modern world versus, sending out resumes or whatever people used to do in the last century.
Right.
And you kindly offered to come on the podcast because you're not the only ColdFusion developer who has this issue of having trouble finding a job. In fact, in our annual State of the ColdFusion Union, State of the CF Union survey, see if I can say that right, one of the number one pains that developers have with ColdFusion is finding jobs.
Right.
Ironically enough, the pain on the flip side with CIOs is hiring people who have ColdFusion skills, who fit in with things. So there's some kind of mismatch there, because it doesn't make sense that both sides would have the same issue. But
that's actually, it's funny. I hear that as a reason to not use ColdFusion is they say we can't find ColdFusion developers.
okay, well, anyone who's saying that right now, here's someone right here on the shows who's great at ColdFusion, willing to travel, relocate anywhere in the country, if not the universe, to help you out. So obviously that is 100% true, that it's impossible to hire people. So anyway, that's a whole different discussion. Let's talk about how, if you're looking for either a ColdFusion job because you no longer have your job, or if maybe you're just looking for a better job because you've got a pointy haired boss a la Dilbert, you're fed up with working for, or the work's not satisfactory for you and you'd like to get a new job. What are the ways to do that now? Because how people used to do it, they'd see job ads, they send in their resume, maybe they'd write a cover letter, they'd pray that their resume would make it through the HR hiring screen, looking for acronyms in your resume, and that you might get an interview. And if you get an interview, you get a second interview, and eventually you get an offer. And that's basically the old-fashioned progress. But I have to tell you, that's not how hiring works these days. I mean, yes, that still goes on. People do still send in resumes. Some of them still do get jobs, but it's like a 1 in 100, if not more, probability in that situation.
And I've been on the other side of the table where I've had to evaluate the resumes where you actually look for reasons to get rid of the resumes.
Oh, well, yes.
Well,
because and the reason you do that, just to be fair to people listening who've never done hiring, is when you post a job, you may get 300 or 500 applicants.
Right.
And a lot of them don't apply thoughtfully. They don't check, am I a good fit for this job? They just kind of spray and pray. They spray out their resume to hundreds of different jobs, some of which might be a fit, some of which aren't. And on the receiving end, it can get overwhelming. And so people get ruthless, unfortunately. It's not very, friendly, but they really are doing that. And then in addition, at any larger organization, at a smaller organization, it might be the president or the hiring manager who's doing that, screening process. But a larger organization, there may be an HR department involved. And I have to tell you, in my experience, most HR departments do not understand programming. And so they have a kind of, they have acronyms they look for. They look for ColdFusion, or they look for HTML or SQL or whatever, and they screen. And if you don't have the right acronyms, you don't even make it through to the inbox of the hiring manager.
Don't we have AIs automatically?
Yeah,
scanning?
they have AI. There are AI machine learning things that do the same thing, but they still suck because they can't tell. They can read the acronyms in your resume, and they can read some other things, but no offense, HR people have a lot of great skills, but understanding the software development and who might be a good software developer is not one of the things they really bring to the table. So
seems like it encourages disingenuous resumes too.
There's a lot of resume inflation and lying that goes on. I'm sorry to say, which I don't recommend anyone does. I mean, for sure, list everything you have, be generous in what you put in, because you don't want to get screened out. Right. But I wouldn't even play that game. I wouldn't play the resume game in this modern age of hiring, because that's not how most hiring happens. And how does it happen? First of all, most jobs are not advertised. If you're only about 70% of jobs that are filled were never advertised. There isn't even a job ad to apply to.
70%.
Yeah, most jobs are not advertised because most people go through their network. They ask their development team, hey, we need another CF developer, or we need a DBA. Do you guys know anyone? Maybe they have a hiring bonus, or whatever. This is less likely in government organizations or universities or other big companies. They may have more of a formal process, but in smaller to medium organizations, it's incredibly common that the hiring manager goes to their Rolodex, they know some developers, they think, hey, so-and-so seemed impressive, let me see if they're available.
Wow.
Or maybe they post it on their social media, and there's no formal, job put out there. So it's kind of like the dark matter of the hiring universe, that it's done through who you know and who's visible. And
so it's really important to maintain those networks.
Absolutely. You cannot leave your network neglected for 12 or 20 years. I don't know how many years you've obviously got a network, Doug. You've got a nice LinkedIn profile. We'll come in and do a screen share on that for those who are watching on video, and we'll talk through it for those listening on audio. But even your LinkedIn profile is a little dated in places, which you didn't realize until we sat down and looked at it together. You're like, oh.
Oh, in all honesty, I've been ignoring my LinkedIn to my detriment.
Well, I would say LinkedIn is one of the number one places that most hiring people go to look for candidates or become aware of people.
I'm seeing that now.
Yeah. And we'll talk about why that is, and some of the tools that people use on both sides to hire people and to get hired. And then also, a lot of this is around visibility. You probably know people in the ColdFusion community whose names are like known by everyone, like Ray Camden and Charlie Earhart and Michaela Light, and Louis Mahano, and Brad Wood, various other names. Right. Okay, you're probably not going to get to that level of being known, but if you share regularly on LinkedIn and you share regularly in Facebook groups, people will know your name. They'll know you're a helpful guy. They'll know you're not an asshole. Because that's one of the other things people are trying to eliminate. They don't want an idiot working for them who's, critical and mean and what have you.
So would you say contributing in the open source and the forums is important?
Absolutely. Contributing in open source is great. A lot of more technical hiring managers are going to check to see if you've made any open source contributions. So they'll look for your GitHub, and that's good to include your GitHub URL on your LinkedIn profile and in your resume. People can tell. It's far more transparent, right? You can't lie on what you've done on GitHub. You've either contributed or you haven't. And if you have contributed, they were either useful and you were respectful of other people, or it was not useful and you were a dickhead.
Yeah.
To use some French there.
Now, I will say that in the past, I've had a desire to work in open source, but I haven't had the bandwidth. We've really got to carve out that space, whether we have the bandwidth to do it or not. But in the past, I had worked days and nights and weekends, and I couldn't figure out how to squeeze in that extra GitHub time.
Yes. Well, if you're working 2 or 3 jobs, it might be impossible. But I think I looked at your GitHub profile. Thanks for sharing it. And we'll put it in the show notes for this episode for people curious. But I noticed you'd starred some projects. How long does it take to star a project? Which is basically, that's a like.
1 second.
Yeah. So everyone could do that. If you use, ColdBox, or you use some package inside ForgeBox or whatever, why not show some love and star it? I was talking to Brad Wood the other day. He writes a lot of open source, and he said, how is it that some other languages have 10,000 stars on their framework and ColdFusion has 300?
Right.
Guys, it takes a second to stick a star on something. It's like putting a like on a Facebook post. There's no comeback to doing that. It helps you find it later so you can see the things you've liked. And it's showing a little appreciation, a very low level of effort to people. The next level of thing people can do on GitHub is to, help out with the documentation or report bugs or whatever. And that's not as high a level thing. And the next level up is to learn how to do a pull request. There are articles on how to do that for ColdFusion projects if you've never done it before, and make some fixes or help things out. So, but there's kind of a spectrum of levels of effort. And at the lowest level, I think everyone can have a GitHub profile, right, where you have your contact info and have something about you, and you can like some projects. And next level up, you can help improve the docs, or you can report issues. So on the third level, you can actually do some programming changes. It obviously takes more work. So
absolutely.
But
but that's a very good point, because in my mind, it had always been jump straight into providing the changes, the bug fixes, and there's so much more to it than that, like you pointed out.
Yeah, there's a lot, and same with LinkedIn, right? A lot of people, you fortunately, one of the, we'll come into exactly what you did, but you actually post in LinkedIn. I have to tell you, 95% on people on LinkedIn, or maybe 99%, do not post regularly.
Wow.
Nada, nothing. It's crickets. Yeah, I noticed on your LinkedIn, you post every few days, which is fabulous. But not everyone is comfortable doing that because they're afraid they'll be criticized or they're unsure what to say. Or they feel they're short of time, but everyone has time to put some likes onto ColdFusion related things that they like. Yeah. And you might say, well, why bother? Well, here's the reason. Okay. When you like, LinkedIn is, because very few people post, LinkedIn has a shortage of content. And so you'll notice when you go on LinkedIn, they don't just show other people's posts from your connections, right? But they show that one of your friends liked an article because you might like it too, and they want to show it to you, and there's shorter content in their feed. And the same thing with comments. They'll say so-and-so commented on this article, and they'll show you it. So when you like or comment, it shows up in other people's feeds. It shows up in your connections feed, but it also shows up in those other people, the influencers whose article you commented on, or the other friends you commented on their feed as well.
Creating visibility for you in the process, even though you didn't have to go to the extent of creating a comment. Yeah,
if you do a like, it'll show up somewhere. And this is I know most developers think marketing is a dark, evil art that should never be used. But when you're trying to find yourself a new job, you really are effectively marketing and selling yourself. So you need to learn something around it and be okay doing something.
And that was the rude awakening that go ahead. I'm sorry.
And realize that it's putting your name out there. If people don't know your name, how are they going to hire you?
Yep.
This podcast is brought to you by TerraTech, the ColdFusion experts. Develop, secure, optimize. Get detailed show notes on today's episode and your free CF Alive Modern ColdFusion Guide at terratech.com. That is TerraTech.com. And now back to today's show.
How are you going to stand out from the pack of 500 resumes who came in? You're not. So
we have to treat ourselves as a client and give ourselves time each week for that marketing, for that promotion. And that's what I've neglected in myself.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be long. It could be 5 minutes a week would be better than most people do. If you have more time, that's fabulous. If you can make it a game, you can do a lot of this stuff on your phone. If you're waiting for a bus or you're early for a meeting, get your phone out and just do a few likes or quick comments on some posts. It doesn't have to be sit down for 3 hours solid. You can take 1 minute and put a few likes in on some posts, and that's achieving something. Plus you might find something interesting. You never know.
Every time I do it, I learn something.
Absolutely. And it supports the people who are taking the time to write content, whatever it is. Or another way to go about it, when you've advanced from doing likes and comments on other people's stuff, when you're writing your own stuff, it may be some small tip you learned in ColdFusion, or a new tool you saw, or there was a new release of ForgeBox made last week and you want to write about it. Or maybe you read a blog post related to ColdFusion and you write a few sentences on it and then give the link to it. Yeah. It doesn't have to be like an essay, it could take you 5 minutes. If you're already thinking about talking to your cube mate about whatever the thing is, or your ColdFusion friend or whatever, why not spend the time to write a few sentences about it and share it with others?
I just did this one. I've been reading this book and put one on that because this excited me.
What's the book, Doug, for those listening at home?
This book is Modern ColdFusion, CFML in 100 Minutes by Luis. I'm going to butcher his name. Mahano.
That's okay. You get one free butchering because I butchered your name a little bit. So yeah, you could. There's many ways, and you can look at what other people do to get ideas. But for those listening who are afraid to post, just start liking and commenting because that's doing something that is supposed. And then also connecting to people is the other thing to do there. So,
now, would you say in the LinkedIn environment to keep it business-like? This is not an environment to post our political commentary or that we're playing in our gardens, that's more for Facebook.
I people take different views on this, and I think this has shifted since 2020 when we had that little COVID thing start, and people have been a bit more transparent on LinkedIn. But LinkedIn is a professional, job finding network, and you've got some companies will look at what you write there. So they used to say many years ago, if you're in a polite company, you don't talk about three things: politics, religion, or sex. And I think that's probably a wise thing to follow in LinkedIn, unless your job is directly to do with politics, religion, or sex.
That makes sense.
Interesting job if that intersects with ColdFusion, but there you go.
But
that would be my personal advice. But if you're going on a kayaking trip, or you're climbing a mountain, or you've reached a new milestone with your Boy Scout troop or whatever, sure, share something personal about yourself on occasion. Not every post, it's not Facebook, but I think there is room to bring a bit of personality in, and
to show that you're a well-rounded person, and let them learn more about who you are.
Yeah, and exactly. And because those kind of things are not typically diversive. No one's going to get upset that you planted a new row of lettuce in your garden to have healthier food, or you climbed a mountain in, sandals, or whatever you did. I don't think that's, and often you can often pivot it back to programming somehow, right?
Correct.
Not always, but often it's possible to say, well,
Well, it is interesting that the stuff I have done in Scouts, the leadership and what we teach those Scouts has directly influenced how I work with my clients and my jobs. So there is a tie-in.
Yeah, you can say that. And I think LinkedIn, for people looking for a job, LinkedIn is the place to be, because that's where hiring managers will look for people. Yes, you can use Facebook. There's a Facebook ColdFusion Programs group. How many hiring managers are lurking in that group? I don't know. It's more developers. Same with the ColdFusion Slack channel. Again, it's probably mostly developers. So they might be able to link you up to a job, but they're not going to hire you themselves.
So what about all the old job sites? I know decades ago, Monster. I'm not sure if I should throw out names, but Monster.com
you
used
can
to
phone
be a
out
thing.
names. There's a bunch of job sites.
Are they still relevant?
You can have I'm not saying it's impossible to get a job there. I'm just telling you most jobs happen through networking, and most networking these days happens through LinkedIn. So
because those job sites tie back to what you said in the beginning about job postings and where jobs, 70% of them come through networking.
Yeah. So yes, you can put a profile up on there. Yes, you can look at job ads there. But at the end of the day, you're effectively, among hundreds of other people. And then how do you stand out? It's tricky. And yes, there are tricks you can do with your resume and with your cover letter, and reaching behind the system. If the system's funneling your resume into an application tracking system, which is typically what happens, right? It's not like your resume goes straight to the hiring manager's box. It goes into some software where they suck out the keywords and try and rank it and what have you. And probably, the HR department and the assistant to the hiring manager, throw out a bunch of people, and you don't want to be thrown out. So it's really not an ideal way. Now, what some people do is they try and go do an end run around that, and they try and figure out who is the hiring manager or who are the people influencing science, and then connect to them directly without saying, I want the job, but like, hey, you have a cool initiative going on, can we, congrats on that. Or one of the other
social engineering.
Yeah, do some social engineering to get to them. But this is something, again, to cultivate over time, to get to know people who you might want to work for in the future, and have what I call an informational interview with them. In other words, it's not a job interview. You just want to it's a coffee chat. You just want to get to know each other.
Oh, right.
Yeah. And then it gets their defenses down, because as soon as you say, I want a job, how are they going to react? It's sort of like when you go into a car showroom and the salesperson comes up to you like, oh, would you like to buy a car today, sir? And you know what happens. Yeah, you go defensive. And the same with hiring managers. They get overwhelmed. But if you're just like, hey, I just want to, you're doing cool stuff in your company, I'd like to learn more about it.
Right.
And I understand you don't have any jobs open right now, but I'd like to learn more about it. A lot of people will accept that. Or maybe you want to be mentored by them. A lot of people are flattered that they have expertise to share. So there's a lot of ways to connect with people. You may have friends who will give you mock interviews. That's another thing you can do in this
that's
situation. Brilliant. Yeah. So
certainly after 12 years of not interviewing, that would be a nice exercise.
Yeah, because if they're a good interviewer, they'll try and put you at ease because they want to get to the truth, right? They don't want you to be nervous. They don't want to play power games with you. They're just trying to get to who you really are, and is there a good cultural fit between you and their company? Is there a good team fit? Do you have the right attitude? And then in my case, finally, do you have the skills? Because for me, you can always learn skills. You don't know how to use this particular ColdFusion tag, or you haven't used ColdFusion, Adobe ColdFusion 2021, or you haven't played with the latest version of Lucy or whatever. I'm sure with a bit of Googling and a little, watching videos or reading books, you can figure it out pretty pronto if you're a good developer. Right. What you cannot change is your attitude and whether you're a cultural fit. Those are very hard to impossible to change, in my experience of having tried to help people change those things.
That makes sense.
So if those are what I look for as a hiring manager. Do you fit? I mean, in TerraTech, we have a culture that's pretty open. I like people that either they use their intuition when they're programming, or at least they're open to that concept. Right. And either they are spiritual or they're open to being spiritual around things and seeing a bigger picture here. We have a theme word this year in TerraTech of love, which is divine love, not romantic love. And it's around being kind to our clients, being kind to each other, making things easy for people, having a little humor in meetings, being patient.
It sounds like a wonderful environment.
Yeah, it is a wonderful environment, but it means whoever's doing the hiring needs to be a bit of a gatekeeper to keep the assholes out who either don't get that concept or actively work against it.
Do you use personality tests? I just had to take one called the caliper test, and it was a multiple choice test that had really weird questions. It was like, what is your favorite color? Blue, green, Maserati, or an airplane? And
I have used personality tests. I've used the DISC test. I know people who are fans of the Colby test. They give you some insights, but they're not a be all and end all. It's just some indication that here's something to ask people about. Right. It's the same with code. I like to see people's code, when I'm hiring developers, because I like to see, can they write easy to read code, because that to me is key in a software agency. I mean, another thing to consider is what kind of software job do you want? Because I see there being three typical kinds that you can work in an IT department, a company that doesn't do software. Like you work at the university. Universities are not there for software. They're there to educate students or to do research. The software is to assist the university in performing that main job function. The same with most software jobs. You're working in the IT department of a company that is there for another reason. Right. That's the first kind of job. I call that a line IT job.
And we do a lot of, you do integrations, you do SaaS services where your main job is just working between the customer and the third party providing the software.
Yeah, could be doing that, or you could be maintaining the same system for years on end.
Yeah.
Typically in that kind of job, there's not too much unpredictability. It's, you've got the same kind of systems. Maybe there's a new initiative every now and again. Maybe there's upgrades to the latest versions, but it's fairly low stress compared to other options. The other two options are agency/freelancer, where you're doing different projects for different clients all the time, and you're coming in more as an expert. And then there's a lot more learning curve there, but maybe more stress, but there's a lot more variety. And then the third kind of job is where you're working for one of those big tech companies like Facebook or Google or whatever. And they're not doing ColdFusion. So I don't think we have to go into that, but they have potentially a lot more learning curve, potentially a lot more stress, potentially a lot more wacky stuff that goes on in how they organize things. Like,
seems
for example,
like you'd be more of just
For example, Amazon have their managers rank everyone every year, and they fire the bottom 10% or thereabouts, or they were doing that a few years ago. I don't know if they're still doing it.
Wow.
So it didn't matter how good you were. If you didn't, meet that performance test, and the managers were told you must fire the bottom 10%. It didn't matter if your team was full of geniuses.
Wow.
Some of them have to be got rid of. And it was
So
cutthroat.
You're just a cog in the machine at that point.
Yeah. I think there's a bit of that. I'm not saying that these big tech things can't be wonderful. They pay really well. You might get stock options. You're going to probably be working with really clever people. But on the flip side, they may also be somewhat ruthless or have bizarre ways of doing things that might not be fun. And also, I'm going to say this publicly. Google used to have a tagline called "Don't be evil." I don't know if you remember that when they first came in business. They got rid of that, and I would say at this point, some aspects of what Google, Facebook, whatever the other, Twitter, they do some evil things. I won't dig into what exactly evil things they've done, but if anyone interested in that, feel free to email me. I'm happy to tell you. You can do your own research to find out. There's people who've written, whistleblower books on what Google was getting up to. Wow. That was not good. And I think we all know this at some level as programmers. We know that a lot of these companies invade privacy. They take data and then they resell it and do all kinds of naughty things. But, anyway, I won't go down that rabbit hole. Just to say, sometimes in companies, whether they're big tech or even line companies, sometimes you can be working. I mean, I think universities are generally moderately harmless, but there are other companies who do evil things in the world, and you have to ask, okay, am I comfortable doing software for this company or not? Maybe you're fine with it. Maybe you figure the software you do is actually making the other employees' lives better, right? Even though the company itself maybe is doing things that are a bit dubious. So all kinds of questions. Yes. Anyway, I think we should flip over to your LinkedIn profile and talk through that, because we already, zipping through it. So let me see how to do. And for those listening, I'm going to talk through what we're doing. So let's have a look at your LinkedIn profile, Doug. Hopefully you can see the screen share. So that's perfect. Those listening at home, I feel like I'm narrating one of those baseball games on the radio. If you ever listen to baseball or cricket on the radio. So here at the top of everyone's link, and I'm looking at this on desktop, but I do want to point out 50% of LinkedIn users come through mobile. So you do need to optimize 50% come through mobile, because they're busy executives or whatever, and they're on the go and they just flip through it, when they're on the go, waiting between meetings or traveling or whatever. Anyway, so you do want to check it, your own profile on mobile as well as desktop, make sure it works both ways. But let's look at it. Let's look at the first key part of everyone's profile, which is your profile photo. Okay, because human beings are attracted to other human beings. So you need a profile photo. You've got a profile photo here. Looks pretty good. You've got a little tag on it, open to work, which is great. Now, so points for having this. Half of ColdFusion developers don't have a profile photo. It's ridiculous. Yeah, this is the number one thing that people will see. And I'll show you in a minute why that's important. You could improve this photo by if you can afford to, having a professional photographer take your photo. Yeah. Okay. Smiling in it, looking into the eyes of the camera, being friendly. Good things on this, you've got a big headshot, so it stands out. Things I would get rid of is all that you've got, like I think this is a window behind you, but it's kind of, if you're a graphic designer, aesthetic person, this is cutting into your head. Yeah. It's noisy. It's distracting. Yeah. It's unnecessary. So either Photoshop it out, or with a professional photographer, they'll photograph you without that kind of stuff. So that's good. Okay. So that's number one. Second thing, well, your name, you're probably not going to be able to change, and you probably shouldn't change your name. You will see people on LinkedIn who put stars and things. That's actually against the terms of service to stick that into your name. So I don't recommend you do that. But the next most important thing is your tagline, right? And yours is IT software developer at University of Texas. Pretty boring. Doesn't say the word ColdFusion. Assuming you want a ColdFusion job, might be an idea to get the word ColdFusion into there, somewhere. If you don't want a ColdFusion job, you need to get the technology or your differentiator in there.
And that's not just pulling from your most recent job. That is
No.
something I typed in.
That's something you typed in. If you on
Okay.
your own, I'm looking at your profile, not my own, but on your own
Correct.
profile, you can edit. There's a little pencil icon. You can edit that. So I would get ColdFusion in there. Maybe you want some other word that stands out, right? Because you know, there's probably I know there are hundreds of thousands of ColdFusion developers out there. So maybe you want something that differentiates you. And what I would typically do is front load the tagline. You get up to, I think, 240 characters these days, but the first few characters are what matters. Because they
my
show
business
up on
card
searches.
says I solve problems. That probably isn't what goes there. It's
Well,
we still need the keywords.
Yeah, you want some keywords and you want to stand out. So typically I'd have something like, you know, ColdFusion, I don't know, developer, and you're an analyst as well, I think. So you might want to get that in there.
Mm-hmm. Extraordinaire.
Yeah, you can add extraordinaire. You could add, and then you could add something about yourself at the end, like expert juggler. And that's not because anyone's going to hire you because you do juggling as a hobby. It's because it stands out and they're like, oh, that's interesting. It's like an icebreaker.
Yes.
So those are what I put in there. And then the third most important part of your profile is having this background image that appears at the top of the thing. And it's great. Most people do not have a background image. They leave it blank. Okay, so hats off for having a background image. But this background image, for those listening at home and not watching the video, Doug's background image is this really clever thing where he's touching a mirror, but he's looking in the same direction on the mirror, which he must have photoshopped or done some other clever tech trick to achieve. But what the heck has it got to do with ColdFusion?
No, nothing.
Yeah. So honestly, unless
I put it there because it was blank, and I thought it was
so good.
I thought it was something somebody might go, how do you do that?
Exactly. But if you can either pivot the image by adding some text into the image that relates to what you're looking for in a job, or what differentiates you, or make an image that's related to it. So if you've attended a conference and you have some photos from the conference, those are ideal because they show you networking or they show you speaking.
Gotcha.
You can change your image every month if you want to, or every week. So that photo you shared of you with that ColdFusion book might be an idea for an image.
Oh, nice.
So yeah, because anyway, you can play with the images to do that. But the reason it's important is because it takes up a lot of real estate, and it's an opportunity for you to say some of your top skills or how you're different. I will point out that your profile photo kind of overlays the image, and it overlays it differently between desktop and mobile. So you've got to be careful where you stick text and where you stick your face.
How do you feel about that header image having some sort of word cloud that is full of the not too much, but full of the keywords for the thing? You know, it's
perfect.
ColdFusion.
That would be great, but get your human face in there too. Okay. Human beings, like monkeys, react to other faces of their species. So word clouds are cute. Definitely, you could have a word cloud in there as long as it's got your face in there as well, because this is your profile, not Adobe's ColdFusion profile.
Right.
Now, those were the top three things. You get those things right, you're ahead of the game. And let me just bring up the results of a search. So here's a search. So I did a search, and here's what happens when someone's looking for someone in LinkedIn, right? Maybe they're looking for their next ColdFusion developer. And I blanked out the people's names to hide the names of the valiant or the guilty here. But you can see when you do a search, all they see is your photo, if you have one. Now you can see these first two people have photos. Third one doesn't. Who has the most trust here? This third one doesn't, because they don't have a photo. You can see it tells you where they are on, how close are they in, second level connection or first level or whatever. It gives their tagline, and you get about, I think, I forget the exact number of characters, but let's say it's 60 characters. So that's why it's important you front load your tagline with the important keywords.
Right.
Okay. Then it says where you're from, and it says connections in common. That's all people get to see. This is all the information they have to decide should they click further to investigate Doug, to see if Doug is of interest to them for hiring.
So this is your elevator pitch, your 30 seconds to impress.
And your profile photo is part of that. And a good profile photo will stand out. Some people put cute things in their photo. That can sometimes work. Like if you're into motorbicycling, maybe you have your motorbike in the background. You know, if you're into juggling, maybe you're juggling. I'm not saying you should do that, but some people will.
Gotcha.
And definitely you want to be smiling, and definitely it's great to have a photo. You see these ones, the head's kind of small. Right. It's not a headshot. Headshots work better because you can see how teeny tiny this image is. I can't even see the person.
Right.
Whereas when there are people I can see, you know, it works out better. Whoops, I didn't mean to flip to that. Got two browsers running. Doesn't matter. It was just the show notes. So those are the key points in LinkedIn. Now let's talk about some other things you can do in your LinkedIn. Here, this is the company you work at. Notice right here, it says no company because you've left a blank for the company you're currently at. If we went down, I'm going to scroll down to your experience section. And because you no longer work at the University of Tennessee, right? You're working freelance computer consultant. That's fine, but make up a company name for yourself. Make up a company logo, right? Because you can see right at the top here, and there's no name, which people are going to be like, what's that mean, right? And secondly, there's no logo, which is a trust signal. Yeah. It's a branding thing. So, you know, give yourself a logo. And I'm just going to skip down to the experience section because you can see some of the older jobs you have, because either you misspelled the company name or they didn't have a LinkedIn page when you created this, you know, entry in your LinkedIn profile, or they don't have a logo themselves. So either you can search for them and find that, you know, this one says Internet Billing Systems, but maybe in LinkedIn, they call themselves IBS, or maybe they call, well, probably they wouldn't because that's an acronym for something else, not very tasty, but maybe they're Internet Billing Systems LLC or Internet Billing Systems International or some other name. And if you search for it, you can find it. And then their logo, if they have one, blah, blah. Sometimes you'll have old jobs. I've had this issue myself on my own profile. You'll have old jobs where the company no longer exists. And in which case, I'm going to say something slightly naughty, which is just create the company page for them and put a logo in. So it has a logo because it looks more trustworthy to have logos there. All right, just going to scroll back up. Another big red flag on your profile. You've got 349 connections. Not a lot of connections.
Okay.
LinkedIn will let you have up to 30,000 connections. You should at least have over 500.
Wow.
Because it will say 500 plus. It doesn't count. It doesn't show the count to other people once it gets over 500. And
now, how do you
why should you have more connections? Because every time you like, comment, or post is shown out to your connections when they come into LinkedIn.
Gotcha.
So you're expanding your reach. Not maybe those people you're connected to aren't directly going to hire you, but maybe they have a friend or a manager who could. Yeah. Or maybe they hear about a position. They're like, oh, Doug's looking for a job. Let me help him out, you know?
So how do you recommend growing those connections? Because I've always approached it organically. A request comes up and I look at it and I say, oh, I don't know this person, so I'm not going to create the connection. Or it's a recruiter that I didn't think I'd be working with.
Okay.
We should
so I'll give you the official LinkedIn answer. The official LinkedIn answer is only connect to people you know, whether you know them online or in person. I'll give you a more practical answer, which is, do they have a pulse? Could they be theoretically helpful to you in expanding your reach? So my general rule of thumb is if they look like a real human being and they might be helpful. I mean, for you as a ColdFusion developer, anyone who does ColdFusion or any other programming language, to me, is a reasonable person to connect to.
Makes sense.
To accept a connect request. And there's two sides to this, okay? There's accepting other people's connect requests and there's making your own.
Okay.
So for accepting other people's connect requests, if in doubt, accept. You can always reject them later. Yeah. I don't think they get notified when you unconnect from them.
Okay.
I personally, although some recruiters are wonderful human beings, others are idiots. I would personally connect to them for this reason. They know a lot of people and they're connected to a lot of people. And so sense. When people are searching, coming back to the search screen, you see these people says second level. You don't know who the first, well, it does say here are the people, right? But suppose you were trying to find the hiring manager and it said Doug is a second level connection when they're searching, they're more likely to check you out because they have more trust. And even if that second level connection is a recruiter or a marketing person or some other internet bimbo,
Right.
sorry, recruiters, I do love some of you, but it doesn't matter because it creates the perception that you have a connection in common. Yeah.
Right. Correct.
So oops, I keep flipping to the wrong browser. Sorry about that. I use the Brave browser, but it doesn't work on all the websites I have, which kind of sucks, but it is more private. And it doesn't in particular work for LinkedIn, which I'm irritated about, but that's another whatever. So I would rack your brain and your email. I think you can upload all your email address book into LinkedIn and it'll,
Really?
Yes, I think so. But even if it doesn't, you can go through your email, the emails you've sent, and you can go through your address book. You can rack your brain for people you met at conferences and just send them a connect request and always personalize the request, right? You have an option in the browser. On mobile, sometimes it just will send a connect request, which is fine if you have a photo and you have a good tagline and you have connections in common. People will generally accept that. But
right.
It's better if you're cold outreaching to people you may not know personally, that you add in a little note like, hey, Luis, I really admired your book on ColdFusion, been following you for years, let's connect. Chances
sense.
are you flattered him a bit. He realizes you're not an internet bimbo or bimbo-y or whatever the male equivalent is.
Right.
And, it makes sense to connect and don't pitch. Please don't pitch people when you connect. I mean, I get this a lot from people who connect with me on LinkedIn and they want to meet, they connect and they immediately want to sell me on something, whether that's hire me for a job or, hire my company. It's a bit of a turn off. So, send something, if you want to send them a message, send something useful to them or interest to them. Hey, saw this article on Luis, I saw this article on Coldbox, or I saw this review of your new book, or whatever the thing is, something that's more about them and not about you.
Follow Dale Carnegie's advice.
There you go. Win friends and influence people, make it about them.
Exactly.
So anyway, expand your connections by racking your brain and your address book and your Facebook, right? You probably have friends on Facebook you don't have on LinkedIn, right?
Probably.
There are probably people in the Facebook programmers group where you've interacted with them, but you didn't connect with them on LinkedIn. Now,
Absolutely.
in the future, when you interact with someone, you immediately can go to LinkedIn and say, hey, loving the discussion about, the new VS Code editor for ColdFusion I'm having with you in the Facebook group. Love to connect you on LinkedIn. And there's your blurb.
Easy in. That makes sense.
Yeah. So get more connections. I believe there's a throttle limit on LinkedIn of maybe 50 connections a day. So don't go too crazy. And in addition, LinkedIn, there's an option when you send a connect request to someone, they can mark it as spam. You don't want that to happen. And that's why you want to connect to people that either really know you, or alternatively, you can write something in the note that's flattering. And that's why you want a profile photo and you want a good tagline, and you want connections in common with the people you're trying to cold connect to. So that's connections.
Good stuff.
Then we go to your about section. Now this tells me about what you've done, but do I really care about that if I'm trying to hire you? Not really. So now this section here, goals, I think you could update that based on something else you told me, but that would be, here's how you can help this person who's going to hire you. Right? So I would lead with that.
So less like a resume, more like a more personal.
More personal, more like you're trying to sell yourself, which is what you're doing, but you're doing it in a friendly way. And you're distinguishing yourself from other people. Now, no harm in having some buzzwords in here. In fact, that'll help. There's a search algorithm in LinkedIn. When you do this search up here, you can put ColdFusion in or SQL or whatever, and it will bring this up. And there's also, I noticed, let me just come back here. I know some other good things here. You've got this LinkedIn InMail icon, which means anyone can message you even if they're not connected for free.
Right.
Okay. So, because if you don't have that turned on, and we'll talk about how you get that turned on in a moment, then people like me who have a paid LinkedIn account get to send 30 messages a month or something to people they don't know. Do you think I'm going to send that message to someone if I'm not particularly certain, they're an important person to send to? Probably not. But if they have anyone can send me a message, well, of course I'm going to message them. Yeah. So how you get that is you get LinkedIn Premium, which I want to say is about $80 a month, but they give you a month for free, I believe. And sometimes you can persuade them to give you extra months for free by canceling and re-signing up. But I think it's worth the $80 a month, particularly when you're searching for a job. And it also it makes your search better. You can find more people once you have it. And it also gives you LinkedIn Sales Navigator, which is this little link up at the top right that you may not have noticed. And that's an even better search. It has much more fine-tuned. You can search for job titles and geography and age of company and position in the company and all kinds of stuff. So you might check that out after the podcast interview.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, it's a whole new level. It's a totally different interface. It works a bit different. It has a different setup. I will say LinkedIn is a little buggy sometimes. I wish Microsoft would get their act together. And they're always changing features. But Sales Navigator and regular LinkedIn are actually seems like two different apps. And
oh, really?
Yeah, really. So anyway, check it out and play with it. It lets you do much more search. It lets you reach more people, because in regular LinkedIn, you can only get to like your first and second level connections, maybe your third. But with the Sales Navigator, you can get to more people who you aren't connected to. And they even have more levels. They have a sales version and they have a recruiter version that are even more, powerful, I guess is the word, but even more expensive. So, but by getting LinkedIn Premium, you get the Sales Navigator and it lets you extend your search. Let me just skip to I don't know if you've seen this. There's a menu up here: Home, My Network, Jobs, Messaging, Notifications, and Me. So usually people start on the homepage because that's where LinkedIn throws you, and you might check messages, but you may not be aware of My Network. Okay, so let's look at that. This will be My Network, not yours. And this says things that have happened to people I'm connected to, and it gives me an opportunity to, comment on things. There's all kinds of, it gives me suggestions on people to follow or connect to. So worth looking there. And if someone in your network has done something, maybe they made a post or maybe they changed their jobs or something, you could comment on that and it creates a connection. Yeah.
Fantastic.
So,
and like you said before, it becomes visible to all of their network.
Yeah, it comes visible to their connections. And because your tagline is because you're looking for a job, probably going to work that into your tagline, right? Expert ColdFusion developer, looking for mine, I don't know how you're going to phrase it. I can't quite come up with the phrasing.
Available immediately.
Yeah, there you go. Exactly. Okay, so here under the jobs menu, you can post jobs if you were hiring, but you can also set up a job alert for things you're interested in. So you're interested in ColdFusion jobs or, database jobs or whatever. And you can fill out several other things. So, and in particular, if you do a search, I can see that here under ColdFusion Developer, there's 698 new positions within LinkedIn, and there's probably a bunch of old ones.
So those are the positions. That's not people looking for the jobs. Those are the positions available.
These are positions.
Wow.
Yeah. So you could go in there and investigate, hey, of any of these ones listed, do I have any connection to those companies? Maybe I already know someone there. Maybe I'm really interested to work for that company because they're doing cool stuff that I'm interested in, So you could apply through this, but again, you're then going into a resume mill.
Correct.
Although it's sending your LinkedIn profile, not your resume. So anyway, that's good too. And then notifications, that's more around your posts. So and then if you go into the Me Pro one, well, the settings and privacy, I won't dig into that, but inside there you can say, can people see when I update my profile? Well, some people want to be sneaky and not, have people know they're changing jobs or whatever. But in your case, you probably don't want to be covering that up.
No.
When you change your tagline, you want your whole network to know you've changed your tagline. Or when you change your profile photo, you'd like them to know that. So make sure you haven't cranked up the privacy so high that no one can see what you're doing. And
That makes
then
sense.
any companies, like your own company for your freelance stuff, would appear here. And then what I want to do is, oops, not settings and privacy. That was one I wasn't going to try and go to.
Oops.
Never mind.
The back
Never
button.
mind. Doesn't matter. It's not that secret. I generally keep most things open on this thing. Let me just go back to this. I wanted to go to posts and activity. So here, if you haven't seen it, you can see all your activity. This is all your likes, all your comments, all your posts. Okay. Right. Then you can see any articles you've written. You might be articles. What's an article? That's like a longer form post, like a blog post, but within LinkedIn platform.
Oh,
so
wow.
Yeah, that's the thing. And then you have regular posts, which can either be short or up to 2,000-ish characters. So the reason I'm showing this, it shows how many people have looked at it. You can view analytics. Okay.
So this is where you can kind of give back to the community through LinkedIn. This is where
by posting, But I'm showing you
demonstrate your knowledge.
I'm showing you this because you can see the analytics on this, and you can see how many reactions were there.
Oh, wow.
Who looked at it? Was it other software engineers? Was it developers? Was it CEOs, solution? Who is looking at your stuff?
That's the paid version, right?
I think that may be. I've had the paid version for so long. I'm sorry, I can't remember.
Yep.
And then you also can upload documents like presentations or Word or Google Docs. So I've sometimes I wrote this guide to ColdFusion hosting, and I made it a LinkedIn doc. So if you have any blog posts related to ColdFusion, you could repurpose them here.
Interesting.
So those are some different things. Anyway, let me come back to your profile.
I logged into the mobile app this morning, and it said turn on creator mode. Get discovered.
Do not turn on creator mode, please.
Okay, I was gonna ask you, what is that relate to what you were just saying?
No, what that means is it makes it harder for people to connect to you.
Really?
Yes, because if you look at people who have creator mode turned on, you see, well, I'm already connected to you, but imagine I wasn't connected to you. One of these options here would be connect to Doug. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
When you turn on creator mode, it's like you've suddenly become, I don't know, name some famous journalist to you, Bob Woodward or whatever. Okay.
Right.
And now you just want people to follow you. So they put the follow button in, highlighted, and then you have to click under the more menu before you can connect. And it'll kind of warn you, do you really want to connect to Mr. Woodward? Do you really know him in real life?
Okay.
So
I'm glad I asked.
You're searching for a job, you don't want to turn that on, and the features it gives you are not that useful. So
gotcha.
I would not, glad you asked that. All right, we talked about you've got a featured piece of content. That's great. You definitely want that. Here's where you can highlight extra cool stuff. I don't know where SlideShare is, but it's not showing a slide.
Yeah,
so you
honestly,
might want to check that out.
This is antique content that I had originally thought for every project I did, I would do a one-page project brief, kind of a marketing page showing what was done, because so much of what I've done in the past has been proprietary that you can't really show.
Come up with something relevant here.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's 3 things I love about ColdFusion, and have a graphic that yells ColdFusion if that's what kind of job you're looking for. Or I don't know what you might write here, but it's got to be something. You've got to think creatively what would stand out to people who might hire me or I want to connect to.
That's
like
perfect.
this post you did here. Let's just come into this post. This is a great post you did, Doug. Here you took a photo of yourself with a somewhat excited, I think that is how I describe that, together with a book on ColdFusion. And then you wrote 3 sentences about it, and you got the keyword ColdFusion. By the way, if you put a pound sign in front of a keyword like ColdFusion, it'll put it in bold, and it'll show up in the there are tags that show up in.
No, I did tag it at the very end.
Oh, so you did. Yeah, ColdFusion. So you see that comes out in bold. So that's a great post. You managed to get some likes out of it. I'll give you a like.
Oh, excellent.
So
thank you.
Yeah. And I'll write a comment. See, the comment is a 3-word comment I'm adding. Great CFML book. All my followers will see I wrote that comment. It has the word CFML in it. They know I'm something to do with ColdFusion.
And it did not take you 10 minutes to write that. So
it took me about 5 seconds to write it.
Yeah, it's just easy. We should all be doing that.
Yeah. Now, so this is your activity. You definitely want activity there. I mean, I would say post at least once a week, or one
Okay.
if you're having difficulty, once a month, and like if you can start off with likes and comments if you're afraid to post. I understand a lot of people posting on social media is somewhat analogous to speaking in public, and a lot of people are nervous about it, and I understand that. So, but you ain't going to get in trouble by liking stuff, and you're probably not going to get into trouble by commenting on stuff as long as you're respectful and say something appropriate. All right, experience section. Missing some logos, as mentioned earlier, missing some company names. Otherwise, looks pretty good. Now, this is another place you can showcase how you are different from other people, right?
Okay. So that was a question I was going to ask on this. Was I tried to keep it resume short, but it sounds like what you're saying is use the space. Okay.
Because LinkedIn does keyword searching, and these might be some of the keywords people look for. And in addition, you can make it more human and more like cool stuff, right?
Okay.
Don't make it all techie, whatever.
This isn't your one-page resume. This can be verbose.
And you know how in modern resumes people try and sell, here's the business benefit I did in this application, right? We help save 20,000 hours of man work by creating an app that did blah blah blah, and we developed it in ColdFusion 2016 and SQL Server or whatever you did. But you lead with the business benefit usually, if you can. All right, same for all these old jobs. Try and make them stand out a bit, right?
Gotcha.
These read a bit boring, to be honest, because they read like old school resume stuff.
Well, that's exactly where it came from.
Yeah. Now, education. If you've been to university, and personally, I'll hire people. I don't care if a developer's been to university or not, but I know some companies do.
Right.
So great that you have this in here and you've got a paragraph, but why not lead with something related to your ColdFusion thing, or you did some computer science at university? Doesn't that make you stand out? Shouldn't you? Why not say, I loved the course on whatever, numeric computation or on Boolean logic because it helps me now write better ColdFusion programs or whatever you do. I wouldn't start off. Now, it's great to say you were president of a society, but I wouldn't lead with that. Yeah.
Right.
Because that shows leadership ability, but I don't think that makes sense to lead with. And I try and make this more human. Maybe you started juggling in university. Why not work that into it? And then you've got another university you went to, doesn't say what course you did, doesn't have a blurb about it. Another opportunity you could fill in. I don't know if you get.
So I was going to ask on that one. It was just one class for the summer while I was home for that summer. Should that even be in there?
It's up to you. Can you say something interesting about it? Was the course relevant for what you're looking for?
Absolutely.
Is this university name really exclusive and exciting?
Okay. I see what
like if you did a course at Harvard University, even if it's on, learning how to bind books better, it probably looks good, right?
Gotcha. Makes sense.
Or if you did a course, you did this at the University of Memphis, if it's on like agile software development, that sounds relevant to what you're trying to find. I mean, if in doubt, I'd add it in, right? It looks like you're more educated.
Okay.
I don't know if you can add blurbs into these. See if you can. I have a feeling you can't, but you can edit and see what it says. Volunteering is great. You're an assistant scoutmaster. See if you can pump it up more towards, I've been a leader for 20 years, or I've learned, lots about encouraging and leading teams by being a scoutmaster, blah, blah, blah.
Okay.
Or I really enjoy doing this because I enjoy inspiring young people to,
And it absolutely, the stuff that I've learned in that organization has absolutely benefited me in my professional life.
Right. So you need to say that. So great that you've got a logo against that one. Skills is great. You've got people who've endorsed you for skills. Wondering where ColdFusion is in this list of endorsements.
That's a good question.
Maybe you need to ask a few buddies to endorse you for ColdFusion.
Absolutely.
Then recommendations. This is where people can write about how wonderful you are to work with, or to be working for them if they're a boss. You can request these. You can give them. I noticed you've received 3. You've given 2, which is good. You've got a kind of balance there. So give some, and then you can request people you've worked with or you worked for in the past or currently to do those. Or no, you other way. You've got a patent. Okay, this is amazing. How many other developers have patents? Not many. Why aren't you mentioning this in your about page? I got a patent. Doesn't this show you're a genius?
It's ancient.
I don't care. And I don't know if it has to have this boring uppercase stuff or not. If not, try and make it look a little more whatever, because this reads really boring. Can you say why it's exciting?
I think that was limited in the form, but I'll have to look at that.
And then you've listed some course. I'm sorry, I'm going fast because we've gone a bit over on time, but
I probably talked too much.
Great that you've no, with me, I was talking a lot. Don't worry. And this is all good material. You've listed courses you've done. That's great. You've listed spoken languages. That's great. All ads, whatever. You've got a few influencers you follow. How about you follow some ColdFusion influencers or some Boy Scout influencers, or other things that might be relevant? It just creates a talking point.
Gotcha.
So
Makes
add
sense.
a few in there. So anyway, the other thing, I don't have this up here. It lets you, there's a thing, I can't see it because this is your profile, not mine, but there's a little section that says add, edit your sections that display it. And you'll probably find there are sections you've not even used that you could add in. And if in doubt, add them in. Because the more you can put in here, the better in general, as long as it's related to what you're trying to find.
So there's that old thing about keep your resume to 1 or 2 pages. When it comes to LinkedIn, it sounds like we can just fill it up. Yeah,
go nuts. As long as it's relevant, as long as it relates to what you're trying to find, relates to you as an interesting human being, or adds some other differentiator or color to how you're different from all the other candidates and helps you stand out, then good to do.
Makes great sense.
I would say, and avoid politics, religion, and sex.
Naturally.
Unless you work for a political organization, a religious organization, or a sexual organization, then it's okay to talk about that particular topic. Otherwise, personally, I would leave it out of your LinkedIn.
Absolutely.
So I'm going to stop the screen share there. That
was fantastic.
I think we covered all the LinkedIn things there. I would encourage you to be authentic and be yourself. Some people write really stilted when they write in their profile, or you don't do that, but other people do. Be yourself, be natural. And so that's good. Let's, I just want to briefly bring up your GitHub profile. We talked about that before. I hope everyone listening to this has a GitHub profile and they're utilizing it. So let me reshare this briefly. I'm not going to go into as much detail on this, but have a GitHub profile. This is a way you can contribute to open source. Here you can see Doug has a photo. Great. You're going to get a better photo here that doesn't have the windows behind you and looks a bit happier.
Absolutely.
And you excellently have all your contact info, though here it says self-employed. And I think really you probably want to be saying, I don't know what you want to say there, but I'm not sure self-employed's it. Then you can see you've done lots of contributions compared to most other people who make no contributions to open source projects. And I can see that you've worked on these following repositories. And if I drill down, I can see what you've done. And I see you've given 345 stars out to various projects, which is amazing. Brad Wood will be fantastically excited. I can filter this, however, by ColdFusion to see that.
Oh my.
Yeah, you didn't know that, did you?
No, I did not.
Yeah, and we can now see that, maybe there aren't so many ColdFusion opens, so maybe you want to do a bit more starring of ColdFusion stuff you've actually used.
Yep.
Which I'm sure you can come up with some more things.
And I actually contributed to CF Wheels. No, I didn't.
Yes,
I didn't know
that's
about
great. So great job on that. I encourage everyone listening to have a GitHub profile and to start starring stuff and eventually start contributing. Because it's a way that a lot of potential employers will look at you. They'll see, have you contributed and what kind of contributions you make and what kind of person were you when you interacted with people? Because some of the people, I will tell you, when they do a pull request or they complain about a bug, they're not very respectful or friendly or helpful. Yeah, and this is public info, so you want to do that. Now, let me just quickly flip. You've got a cover letter here that you kindly said we could share you.
It's a bit of a mess.
Well, that's okay. Your cover letter is probably no more mess than anyone else's. So first of all, it's a PDF. You want a cover letter to be a cover email, or if you you're sending printed physical stuff in the post. I guess you could do it that way. Doug has kindly blanked out who he sent this to, but criticism number one is it's generic. Yeah, it really doesn't talk about their company and why you really want to work to them. And from that, what was that book you mentioned by Win Friends and Influence People?
Oh yeah, Dale Carnegie's Win
Dale
Friends
Carnegie. What's the most important thing to someone else?
Themselves.
Themselves, their name, their company name, what they're about. What are you starting off here? I. Does it ever get to them?
No.
How about you talk about them a bit? Yeah.
Good point.
And how about you personalize it to their first name? How about you, this is a bit long for a cover letter, to be honest. I do a cover email and I try and personalize it. Hey, great meeting you at CF Summit in 2019. Love what you're doing with XYZ technology at ABC company. Please find attached my resume. I don't know what else you're going to say.
So in the emails, I've been doing a short couple of paragraphs, then attaching this, but you're saying don't attach this, just do it in the email.
No, do it in the email. Who wants to read a PDF, right? Then let's quick look at your resume, traditional resume. Okay. Doesn't say what you're looking for. What's the job you're looking for, Doug? Doesn't say here. It says all your keywords, but I'm looking for a blah-de-blah. I'm looking to do a software team working in virtual reality with, web development stack using ColdFusion or other technologies or whatever it is you want.
Okay.
So, and then again, just like in your LinkedIn, you want to say what business problems or what tech problems what was the big picture business thing you solved, or what was the big piece of technical debt you got rid of? If you were, I don't know who you're trying to be hired by, if it's a CIO, what's important to them, right? Okay. Probably not how you've started this with how your history of how you got hired. Yeah.
And the
God, I hate those notices that come up.
And again, I was approaching this from the challenge of keeping it to 1 or 2 pages. And
that's fine. For a resume, yes, that's correct. You only want 1 or 2 pages. Okay. But you want to talk about achievements. And you mentioned that book, What Color Is Your Parachute? And I think they have a whole chapter on writing better resumes. So that would be good. Some of these things are good. Some of these sections are good. Be better if you had your company name here, if that's what you worked under, instead of self-employed. People look for gaps. I don't really care too much about gaps, but some hiring people look out for gaps. So try and fill gaps creatively if you can.
Gotcha.
Without lying, and then you have to ask, are these older jobs still relevant? Is it for what you're trying to get now? Do you really want to list this stuff?
Right.
Maybe you do. I don't know. If it's an impressive company or you did something really cool there, great. If not, maybe it's not worth listing. And
the last one, I actually created a division of a company. I went from 0 employees to 60, which is why I put it in there.
Well, then say that.
And then
you didn't. Did you say that?
It's down in the bottom. It's 0 to 60.
Okay.
Employees.
Well, were you a manager? Yes, you were.
Oh, yes.
So that's good. And then you were quite young when you did that. So that's impressive.
And then the other one was running my own business. So I kind of felt they were still relevant, but they are old. So maybe they don't belong on the resume at all.
And then you've got your email, you've got your phone number. That's great. You might want to add in your LinkedIn, perhaps.
Okay.
And you might want to say where, what's your availability to talk, right? I'm available to talk, Monday through Friday between these hours or whatever.
That's
so
great.
Those are some ideas. I'm not a resume expert. I'm more a ColdFusion expert who likes LinkedIn. Let me leave that up. Let me stop sharing. Let's forget to do that. So those are some things there. I'll mention something else. Yeah, hopefully this helps you getting your a new job. I'm not going to talk about this in detail because we don't have enough time, but I asked you to do an exercise to figure out your ideal job, because you want to color your LinkedIn and your resume with what you're trying to get, not where you've been. Right? Obviously, you have to tell the truth about where you've been. You try and phrase it in as positive a framework as you can, to relate to show what great things you've done from the perspective of a manager who's going to hire you, not from a tech perspective necessarily. Not that you don't want to mention the tech stuff, but achievements that would make that kind of person excited to want to hire you. Anyway, if you can get to what you want, you could color your resume and your LinkedIn with, here's where I want to be. Here's what I'm excited about becoming. Yeah.
You've got to have that vision.
Yeah, you've got to have that vision. And that's good for two reasons. One is when you're rewriting your LinkedIn, your resume, and you're looking for jobs to apply to, you can say, hey, is this a fit for what I want to be? And you might not get to your ideal dream job in one step. Maybe you have to go through stepping stones, right? Maybe you have to get something that has some of the pieces you want and not all of them. Or maybe you work for the company you want to work for, but in a role that's not your ideal role. And then you work your way towards the ideal role, right?
That makes sense.
If you don't know where you're going, you're not going to get there. So now the advice I gave Doug, and you were very brave to do this, Doug, was first of all, you've got to get to it. You've got to get to a positive state of mind. You've got to be connected to your, whatever you want to call it, your higher self, your intuition, to your angels, to God, or whatever. And so I recommended exercise, work out, go in nature. You went and helped a friend move. Do something that puts you in a positive frame of mind. Because often when we lose a job, we get afraid, am I ever going to get another job again? And B, we may be really angry at our boss for doing whatever they did. Yeah. And neither of those emotions are going to let you get in contact with what you really want to do.
Right.
So you've got to get into that positive love space of mind. So do whatever you need to do, whether you meditate or you have a good night's sleep or you have amazing sex with your partner or whatever it is you do that first, then contemplate what you do. Now, some people can just write down this stuff. You know, they have a direct connection from their intuition to the computer keyboard. Other people, it helps to go on a walk and talk into their phone. Yeah. Other people helps to chat with a friend saying, well, this is what I'm looking for. Yeah. Other people like to write, you know, if you're right-handed, you write with your left hand, you draw a diagram and it comes out looking like a little kid. Because my belief is all human beings come into this world as children full of innocence and light and love and creativity and playfulness. And then they get it, I was going to say they get it beaten out of them, but hopefully not all kids get beaten these days. But we go through traumas. And in particular in work, we have what I would call work traumas. You know, you have a coworker who's an idiot, or you have a boss who doesn't treat you well, or you had that project that was a disaster zone, and we end up with scars. They're psychic scars, not physical scars. And then they affect how we behave in the world and the kind of jobs we're going for. And we're a bit nervous about applying for stuff, and you want to get rid of that. So any healing you can do in that regard before you write out what your ideal job is helpful. And I'd encourage you to do the healing anyway for your own future benefit.
Right.
Anyway, come at it from several angles and work on it and sit on it a bit and come up with what you're looking for.
Those scars can introduce self-doubt and make us doubt going into applying for certain jobs.
Absolutely. And they can make you interact badly with, you know, coworkers or other boss. You know, if you have a boss scar because you have a previous boss who did nasty things, you know, they micromanaged or they, you know, didn't praise you when you did something useful, you're going to be reluctant to behave in certain ways that would be helpful to you and the organization. Right. You know, same true is, this isn't just about work. People have relationship scars, which means they don't date or they don't have as good a relationship. People have health scars where they don't look after their own health as well as they might for various reasons. You know, happens in all areas of life. But we're talking about getting a job. So, you know, putting the health scars to one side while you figure out what you really want is helpful, because otherwise you're going to limit yourself. And also, once you're getting, you know, attracting this job, because I do believe in the law of attraction, and we do attract what we vibrate. And, you know, if you're vibrating negative vibes that you're fearful or you're angry, it's going to make it harder to get a good job.
That makes sense.
So, because people will pick up on it subconsciously. They'll think there's something off about this candidate, you know. And for me, I pick up on that when I look at people's LinkedIn profiles. I can pick up there's something off of it. Yes. Wow. Absolutely. Or looking at resumes. Anyone who's looked through thousands of resumes, or in my case, tens of thousands, you can kind of smell there's something off around someone. And I have to tell you, as a hiring manager, the the cons of hiring someone who's a bad fit, who's a bad cultural fit, who will upset other members of the team, or will do bad work, lost opportunity cost could be tens of thousands of dollars, if not hundreds of thousands, right? Because you spent 6 months with someone who wasn't a good fit. Now you've got to spend more time hiring someone else. It adds up to a lot of time and money. So the downsides of hiring someone who's bad are a lot higher than the upsides of hiring someone good. And so for people who are good at hiring, the tendency is if there's any red flag, any doubt whatsoever, they're a no.
Just get them out.
Yeah. And that's why people are so ruthless when it comes to, the resume game. It's why you don't want to play the resume game if you can avoid it,
Wow. Makes sense.
So anyway,
I think you were talking about the exercise. Did you go over the steps of the exercise?
Yeah, I think I did. I'll put them in the. I think I put them in the show notes to people who are interested.
Okay.
Anyway, it's good to get clear on what you really want, and then you can use it as you're doing your job search, and in crafting your LinkedIn and resume, and what open source projects you work on, right? I think you figured out you'd like to do some virtual reality stuff. Are there open source projects to do with virtual reality? Almost certainly hundreds of them. Could you contribute in some way? Maybe you can't code on them, but maybe you can, like them. Maybe you can help them with their documentation,
Visualize the direction they could go. Yeah, there's all that. Yeah. You've opened my eyes to that you can contribute to more than just code.
Absolutely. So the other thing, if you can network in person, if there are ColdFusion conferences you can make it to.
Yes.
Right now, as we're recording this episode, Into the Box is coming up in a week or so's time, after Labor Day. CF Summit is coming up in Las Vegas in about a month.
CF Summit's fantastic.
It is. It's a great opportunity to learn a lot of ColdFusion and also to meet people in person. And when you've met someone in person, it's a lot easier to connect with them online. It's a lot easier for them to refer you to some job or whatever. So highly recommend going to an in-person thing. If you do have a ColdFusion user group in your local vicinity, it's worth going to those for similar reasons. I know there are a lot less of those around now. If you have the time and inclination, start one up if there are enough people in your town that do ColdFusion. If there isn't, why not just search? You can search in LinkedIn. You're in Tennessee, right?
Correct.
Why not search for all the you go into LinkedIn Sales Navigator, put in ColdFusion in the search keyword, put in Tennessee for the geographic area, find everyone in Tennessee. Maybe some of them are near enough to you could get together.
And say, have a meetup. Yeah, our .NET group does that. We might as well do that with ColdFusion. That makes sense.
Yeah, but be proactive and take some action,
Into the Box sounds fantastic. I had, in my mind, I thought because I'm unemployed, I can't justify going to these, but based on what you were saying, it sounds like because I'm unemployed, I need to go to these things.
Yes, and many conferences, if not all of them, if you find the right person in the conference and explain, look, I just lost my job. I really love your conference. Is there any way I can help you guys out and volunteer? You know how they have volunteers at these conferences. You'll see them at all conferences. They have a little name badge that says volunteer, and they help out, hand out the materials, or they stuff all the flyers in the packets, or they do other things to help the organizer out. And if you're genuine and helpful, and, a lot of times you can go and volunteer at a conference, even if you can't afford to attend a conference.
That's great.
So if you can't convince someone to let you do that, this is something a little naughty. But a lot of conferences, you can fly, you can go to the town, you can not have a ticket, but you kind of hang out around the edges and you yap with people. Now, you can't get into the sessions because they'll check your badge, but you sure as heck can. And in person, in addition, if you didn't get any luck volunteering to help out, when you're actually there and you walk up to someone, you say, I love your conference. I can't afford the ticket, but could I help, can I help you guys out with stuffing these flyers, or, registering people for, totally free. I just want to be here in the vibe. It's a lot harder for them to say no.
That makes
Plus,
sense.
you've shown courage by actually showing up. So, and if you have, in the case of a ColdFusion conference, if you have an old ColdFusion T-shirt from some conference, wear it.
I have an Alaire T-shirt.
Oh, well, there you go. You could wear that. All right. I think we've covered enough time here. If people want to find you online, Doug, what are the best ways to do that?
Well, obviously, LinkedIn is going to be the best way.
And what's your LinkedIn profile name?
It's actually Juggler. So if you go to LinkedIn, trying to remember the format. LinkedIn.
Well, don't worry about that format. The username is Juggler. Your name is Doug McCowan.
Doug close. Doug McCaughan.
McCaughan. Sorry.
McCaughan. There's only 7 people in my life who have ever said it correctly. It's hard.
Okay.
And but if you look for Doug McCaughan Juggler in LinkedIn, you'll find me. I'm redoing my websites. So if you go to cfninja.com, it's going to be a blank website right now, but in the next couple of weeks, hopefully that will have all my contact information and ways to find me on the internet.
Well, by the time this episode comes out, that will be updated. So,
I would give you dougmccaughan.com, but nobody can spell that. So cfninja.com is probably the best.
There you go. Excellent. Well, thanks so much for coming on the show and bearing your job searching soul here. And may you find your ideal ColdFusion job real soon. And
well, thank you. And thank you for your time and your knowledge. This was a pleasure. And you've really, really excited me about my job search.
Excellent. Well, that's the important thing there. All right. Thanks so much. Bye, guys.
Thank you very much.
Get detailed show notes on today's episode in your free CF Alive Modern ColdFusion Guide at teratech.com. That is teratech.com. Viva la CF Alive Revolution!